I think the big thing, because now what we'll do is we'll go into some of the projects that you've gone on to, and I think for anyone listening at home, the reason we're banging on about this mega project is because it gave Ronan obviously a very interesting perspective before stepping out on your own, right? So what were like the main takeaways, and how did you then go? Do you know what I want to do stuff on my own?
Yeah, I suppose I was always wanting to do stuff on my own, and I know yourselves from another group, and we're all very, very driven, and we want to do well for ourselves. But my idea of going to the Middle East, the only reason I went there was at the time was is the most amount of cranes in the world was concentrated in Dubai. So it's like we're best to get an education than going there. Um, but in doing that, I got lucky, or you make your own luck. I want to join mates if I didn't fly over there with no job. I joined Mace, and they were fantastic. The biggest takeaway from Mace is obviously put a strong team around you. But like it's so simple, the procedures, standards, and driving quality. If you don't have procedures in place, you're not going to get a standard, and if you don't have the standard, you're not going to deliver quality. So, um, as small as an operation I went and established, it's such a part of it. So that really has been something I've kept with me. Um, if something goes wrong, you need to be able to trace it and see what happened. Where did we get approval for certain things, or why didn't we do it? A design issue, or have a look at something in a different way. So they were all extremely important. I've adopted them to my own business, but I always wanted to go back and develop myself. My father's background was in property development, um, so he was doing his thing. I kind of didn't want to get morphed into that because I wouldn't get a real raw education of it. So I just flew out straight away to get a great education. And then came back and just had a go. I was 27, 26 when I flew back, 27 when I started the site in Drogheda, and give it a go. And I was young enough, probably naive, not naive. I was always going to do it, but you know yourself, guys. I think you're all the same. Give it a go now, because when you're 40 or plus and you have a mortgage and kids, that risk is maybe you know it mightn't be as easy to take. So I was always going to throw myself at it and hopefully get through it. And I think we can touch on it on a couple of these. And I'm not sure about the rest of the guys, but the sites I learned the most are the most challenging ones. The ones that go straight through and you make money, they're great, but they don't educate you. They don't really
They don't
um
push you. They
they
don't
don't
make you grow,
push
do they?
they
Yeah.
don't push you, but like you can't bring much knowledge to the next site because you haven't gone through many challenges of it. Where I had a couple of nice ones to start, and then I had one excruciating one, which if I got through it, I was going to say I'm nearly going to look at a different job or different project. And that really was an education. And as we always say when we're discussing this amongst ourselves, if you can get out not losing money or making a little bit of money, then it's a very valuable lesson. And luckily, I've been there, went through that, and come out the far side. So they were invaluable experience as well. On my own back, because you guys, as a developer, it can be a lonely place. So it's good to have these chats, figure things out together. You know, more brains is better than one, and I just find it excellent with you guys doing this as part of the podcast to just share and educate along those grounds.
Yeah, banger, mate. Thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, Ronan, just to give a bit more context for anyone listening, could you give us a quick age on age when you joined Mace, left Mace, set up on your own, and then how long it's taken you from there to now?
Yeah, I went out to Dubai when I was 21.
Oh,
I just
mad! Really young.
jumped on a flight in January back in whenever it was, '08 or so, and just needed to get out and find a place. Obviously a big move at that age, maybe, but I'd done it and it was great. It turned out well. um, and then was with Mace. I came back. I was 27 when I started in Newquay, and I'm 38 now. So I'm about 10 years building. COVID in the middle of that. COVID, we didn't build anything
Mm,
for about a year and a half. Spent a bit of time down in Marbella. Went down for 2 weeks with my wife and spent 6 months there. So it was a bit different,
nice,
but that was great crack. Um,
nice.
but yeah, generally that's the bullet time frames. I was straight out of college young. I think I'd finished my degree around 19 and a half, 20 years old, and done about 6 months travel, and then just went at it from there.
Amazing, mate. All right, well let's get on to where you are now, then, sir. So, oh, have I just fucked that up? No. Yeah, there we go.
I think we've
So,
all, you guys, where have you all started from? More or less the same, right? I started with two projects or two houses.
Yeah. Literally. HMO, Guildford, over time, 80 odd contractors sort of work asking what we're going to do because they weren't in the furlough scheme. There were sort of little businesses that are built their businesses around Skyloft. So we had no decision but to buy something just to get them on that didn't involve a customer.
Yeah.
And it started from 1 to 4 in a year. And the rest is history, really. Now we're just doing bigger stuff. And like you said about the educational piece, I mean, you've got to value the development journey with learning the educational piece because it's almost as important as the profit because you need to keep growing and putting yourself in slightly higher risk environments that you're going to learn this stuff. Otherwise, you'll just do the same thing again and again and again. It could get
Yeah.
quite boring quite quickly. You need to push yourself.
I put down lessons learned at the end of every project, like through each from the ground up, from starting at the civils package the whole way through. I always do a lessons learned and try and adopt that and share that with our team.
Yeah, we do that.
Just to try and close the triangle. You're never going to capture it all, but you just don't want to make the same mistakes again. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I started out doing one house at a time, but I was building ground up on the tools, so I could only really do one at a time.
Sure.
Just did house after house after house, and I was like, I like the money, but I don't like being on the scaffolding in the winter. Let's do a few more. So then we set up XP. But no, it's refreshing, Ronan. I think what you mentioned there, if you can do a deal that doesn't lose you money and you gain experience is super key. I accepted an offer back end of last week, just of a flip that we did, and I'm not really going to make a lot off it. And it's just one of those ones you've got to get it done, get it finished.
Yeah,
you might have had a difficult project or a difficult time in the market, but they happen, and it's all about finishing it off, learning from it, and moving on.
Yeah.
Just on the lessons learned, guys, quickly, just on the lessons learned. So with our operation, our construction business, every 3 months we do a non-conformance. So we go out for lunch. There's no blame. We just sit down with the problems we've learned that quarter and we look at new systems, new processes, things to add to our pre-start construction forms, what we need to take photos of, just to constantly keep learning. Because if you don't do that, you just will make the same mistake again and again and again. And that is a problem. That's a big problem when you're losing cash. I don't mind anyone making a mistake once, but if we make it again, then there's going to be a big problem because that gives the team freedom to use their initiative and to grow and to trial things. But if you're making the same mistake 2-3 times, then we're going to have a big problem. So
that's great. I might adopt that myself.
Yeah, you see, you do a proper sit-down lunch with the team, and literally go, look, guys, cards on the table. Who's fucked up? What's fucked up? Blah, blah.
Every 3 months we'll go for lunch. So it'll just be down the village, one of the local pubs where, it's of an afternoon. And then every 6 months we try and go out with the fitters to make it more of a fun, whether it's the races, go-kart and whatever. And we'll sort of adapt new processes in a fun environment because no one really wants to come to meetings, but if you can tie it around something that's, something around Christmas, something around the summer is what we try and do. And we just take all our new lessons learned that we've adopted and put into the system and then try and present them to everyone and say, look, we're now going to start doing things this way because, and explain the whole reason why. And, out of that 10-15% will stick and go long-term. And then things that don't stick, we'll then try and cover in the next meeting and just make little changes all the time, but constantly adapting the process to make sure that we're going in the same direction. Because when you've got a big team as well, it's very difficult to bring everyone on board, and you can't have I don't find AMG big meetings and stuff that powerful. I think having small, close-knit teams in groups where you can spend the time, because it's about quality time to build a culture. It's not about, dictatorship, throwing out a load of processes and going, that's what we're now doing, because it won't stick. You need to just explain all the reasons why we're trying to change this stuff to make it better.
Yeah. No, nice, mate. I'm not gonna. I mean, to be fair, we constantly are talking and chatting, and everyone's around mine most nights, and then we're in the office. So I suppose we're constantly talking about it, but making a formal way of doing it is definitely it's an interesting.
Do you have any issues where you just don't want to talk about it? Where there's a time where you just need to chill out and turn the brain off?
Over time, you can talk about anything, but in the moment, you just, and that we said that on another podcast, is I used to get quite emotional when there's a fucking problem. We just need to deal with it straight away. And it was the wrong time to reply to that email, make the phone call. You just need to sleep on it. If you don't, you'll make bad decisions in the moment. I think that's that's one of the hardest things I've had to try and overcome.
You learn as you go.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of say that. I think one of the sort of true feats of finding a good business partner that I have with Ben is we don't agree on everything. There are times where he wants to do A and I want to do B. And at the end of the day, someone's just got to put their neck out and take the decision. And it's kind of like, it's never told you so or told you I was right. Just crack on. It's either right or wrong or indifferent. But one thing that's really, really clear is there's no emotion in business. It's you sometimes at a crossroads. Sometimes the team is sided, whether it's one person or a group. And you've got to pick one, because I'd rather go down one route, make a mistake and make amends quicker than hesitating and being sat there and not learning or not moving forwards. So Ben and I actually, this is, I don't know if any of you guys do this, but we actually make the decision fun and we put a wager on it. So I'll go, I completely disagree with you, but you crack on and we'll have a tenner on it. And it just sort of makes life fun that when the result does come in, someone's a winner, someone's a loser, but you move on, you pick yourself up and you go again. And it always happens. Like Ben and I have probably got about a dozen outstanding tenner bets. And it's not because, it's just a bit of fun. We've gone with his decision. And then you back that decision. And then if it's against what I think the other party in the business has got to back that and, root for that, the best result is they're right and, the business benefits. So I think taking the emotion out of it and sometimes having a little bit of a wager sort of loosens a difficult decision like that.
Jack, I'm even more of a disaster because in my operational business there is no decision maker apart from me, and I'm gun ho, man. If we think of an idea, bang, let's go that way. And I've actually learned to slow that down a bit, and I've actually brought my key management team in now, so all the heads of departments, they make the decision ultimately as well. So I'm going to try and spread the risk, and you need them fully on board as well. So I'll run probably 3, 4, 5 decisions a month past them. And 1 or 2 of those decisions, we'll know where we're going, but it's ultimately how we're going to get there. And I think those decisions, whether we take this site on or whether we change our process, which is quite a big change, I will run past the office and we'll just literally go through all the pros and cons of that. And then ultimately it will stick or it won't. And that's how we try and deal with it. Because, being on your own is even more of a disaster because you've got no one to bet on yourself. Bet on yourself to make the wrong call.
But I suppose for the listeners out there and even for you, Stu, I run businesses with Ben, and then there's businesses that I run outside of Ben, and Ben runs without me. All the time he'll call me and go, mate, I just need your opinion on something. It's got nothing to do with XP surveys and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
He's like, I actually hit a conundrum in Aura. I just want your opinion. And then I'll go, I think your view's right. Give him my view. And then he goes on. So it's just about being open to making that phone call. Because I know that if any of you three gave me a call and said, I'm at a crossroads, am I making the wrong decision? You'd get an honest perspective. And, you can then still go with your decision. So
almost
just
like
reach out to anyone.
That's actually really underrated how valuable it is to know and trust people that when you go and ask them for something, they're not going to give you feedback that's complimentary or kind of fart asses around what you really need to hear.
100%.
Go, here's what you need to hear, mate. Sorry that you're hearing it that way, but that's the best way I can help you. And that there's just not many people that can build relationships like that.
So there's an office next door to me, which is actually a commercial agency. There's a couple of lads set up on their own, only been going a few years, and they're both from an employment professional background. One's a chartered surveyor, and the other's an ex-estate agent. And they've set up their commercial arm, and they're doing a great job. And we do quite a lot of work with them. And then they've set up their resi arm. And I went in the other day, and he was like, "Oh, we got our branding and logo done for our resi arm," and showed me it. And I was like, "Really sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I fucking hate it. I absolutely hate branding." And he was so taken back that I was so blunt about something that he had created and probably manifested for a little while and a few years. And I was like, I'm being really honest. I think it looks shit. I think it looks completely budget. It doesn't complement your other branding. It looks like you've got someone from the Philippines to do it and paid him a $5. I was like, I think this doesn't represent you as well as a business as it could do. I was complimenting his business, but the branding wasn't there. And I think
just that answer than just a
completely,
okay,
but
it's nice.
Absolutely.
But I think he had probably had 10 people go, "Oh, that looks amazing."
It's lovely. It's
But
lovely.
they're not
Well
actually
done.
thinking about being a consumer and looking at the board outside a house and visualizing it. And I think that's what's great. I love about you guys is because we will call each other out if we think something's, if we think something's a bit hazy or not sure or whatever it
Well,
may
you
be. And
definitely,
that's kind of what you need.
you definitely will, Jack. I can't imagine anyone else who would say it more blunt than you, mate. You won't never hold back. But just on your point, I mean, trying to build a bit of a non-exec board around you, whether it's friends, family, other people who have done it, and you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So, I mean, this is obviously part of the podcast, and part of the people I try and surround myself now is people who are going to elevate you and make you think outside the box. Because if you're just doing it the same way, you will become stale, and everyone else will overtake you.
So important. I think even we meet once a month amongst other guys, and I think that could be so valuable. You go away with a few nuggets that just you adopt into your own business, or maybe you change in your own business because you've heard from guys who've teased it out or they've experienced it on their projects, and it's vitally important.
Just your mindset, Ronan. I mean, being around you, I've changed my whole business model based on 2 or 3 light-hearted conversations over a coffee and a bit of cake, and that's sort of what you need to be around. You need to go, that's a fucking great idea. And just that little tweak, little touch of the dial, and you're on a different trajectory altogether.
And for people listening, like these things are these big projects. They're good and whatever else, but for me, it just doesn't intimidate me now. The size of them once it's in resi, or stuff I know. But for anyone listening, like 2 projects is all you need to start on, or sorry, 2 houses or 3 houses. If you get up to 10 or 15 houses, the rest is all cash flow. So like once you've completed something of 8 or 10 houses, I really think it's then just managing cash flow beyond that. Obviously, going into a bank, etc. You need to have something behind you. You need to be able to show that you've done these things. But really beyond that, there's no difference in doing 100 houses as it is doing 15, which I think any listener should be able to pull from that and just try and get on the ladder, get a first couple of them started.
Just before we move on that, what would be your key takeaways then? Because everyone knows that in development, cash flow is the biggest problem of them all. So what would be your key 1 or 2 little pointers there of how to manage that cash flow and those sort of size of projects?
It depends. Like, in terms of like mine now would be like, obviously you're going to get a QS in on the larger jobs. You're going to price. I'm going to know myself what it's going to be. I know my cost per square foot, etc. So like obviously the simple things you just keep adding to, you keep bringing in. You're going to have contingency in it. You want to keep an eye on any changes or any variations, obviously. So we've systems for adopting variations, or even if it's a design change, even if the architect thinks, this would look better. Okay, it'd look better, but it's going to cost me 60 grand more per, X amount of units. So, if someone's just starting off on a small scale, bring in some help. Like there's QSs out there. There's possibly a guy you can go for coffee with and say, just look over these numbers. But from a cash flow point of view, really hone in on your packages, depending on your skill set. Are you going to bring in a main contractor? I kind of call it, I do it ground up, but I'm like white collar management of it. I bring in subbies everywhere. So, JJ, would you add anything more to that on the cash flow?
I mean, I mean, to manage cash flow and key learnings, what we have really just started, is throwing a lot of our value and attention and money and time at just building out the cash flow. It may sound ridiculous, but the more accurate it can be, the more you can sense a problem later down the line and make that tweak and change. So our business's cash flow is 3 years ahead, and each project is run till end with variations in the contingency. So for us, a project cash flow is actually probably less relevant. It's when you've got 8 projects and they all hit a cash flow problem in the same month is when you get a problem. So it's intertwining the web. So we just didn't cut any corners, and we invested in a really comprehensive, I suppose, bank of spreadsheets that all feed into each other. Then we've now invested in a very comprehensive bookkeeper that keeps them up to date weekly. Well, it's kind of daily, really, because she's working on them through to every day. And that's the main thing. I mean, obvious things such as be very conservative on your build costs. Make sure you've got contingencies in there just for cost, but not also time. Because what you've got to remember is everything on a spreadsheet will always move right, which is delays. It will never come forward. So make sure you contingency those times and then contingency them again. And yeah, as Ronan said, if you've then got the right team around you, that spreadsheet's going to be as accurate as it can be with a contingency in place.
I think one other thing I'd add is just taking emotion out of it. Like sometimes you're trying to get your first or second project, and you just want to get it. And I think you need to stand back a little bit and take the emotion side of it out and make sure the numbers have enough comfort in them. One thing JJ spoke to me about, I think as part of your DD, your due diligence is, your variable. So if it's 10% up, if construction cost is up, or if sales prices are down, I've since adopted that to our profile. So when we're doing an investment models, it has to be still making money within those parameters. So try and take the emotion out of it and leave a little bit of fat. So if something does go wrong, which it will, and you won't know what it is, but if it does, you have some way of tackling it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've spoke about the cash flow paradox. It is a fucking paradox when you're in property development, and anyone listening as well, starting property development or in property development, just anticipate cash flow issues. And one of the solutions that we've spoken about a few times, which all 3 of us have, Dorian has in other ways, but not necessarily to complement his business. And Ronan, it'd be interesting for you to answer this. But we all have these trading vehicles. Obviously, Stuart has Sky Lofts. Jack has XP Surveys and a number of other things. I have the construction, the lettings, the sourcing, and a number of other things that tie in. And they give us cash flow outside of our developments because they are different businesses. You have each development is its own business, right? Is how I like to explain it to people. Is it's got its own business case and business merits. It's like an investment business, but it also has operational procedures. It has cash flow constraints, it has overheads, it has a profit and loss. In some sense, it has profit and loss, but it also has a definitive end date. So there's like an exit to that business, quite a quick exit. So they're ephemeral businesses, but they should be treated like a business, but they are different to then running a servicing business. And that development business, if you like, that's just isolated to each project can have cash flow issues. And if they're collateralized in any way, which we got ourselves tied into during the pandemic when we needed to raise cash and draw it out from equity elsewhere, you can get into a black hole like that, like super, super quick. Whereas if you have these guys over here that are completely isolated from your developments and they're just cash flowing nicely, and you can bump up the sales and be more aggressive if you need to produce more cash flow, and they can just come in and feed in deficits if you have any, because developments go wrong, right? You almost have to anticipate that, 1 in 3, 1 in 5 will just go wrong. So what do you do to get out of it? Some people raise debt, some people have cash. And I think just having cash is the better of two evils, right? That you just fork off profits from elsewhere to cover downsides, or to keep a project moving forwards, or the bank closes on you and you need to cash flow the contractors or something. Do you have any 2 cents on complementary cash flow with your development businesses?
Yeah, I think, and we'll probably all be guilty of it. Every time we've cash, we end up finding something to do with it. Oh, there's a project here, I know, a bit stretched, but let's maybe take that on. And then you have to be so disciplined to keep not just, obviously your fund. You need a fund, you need a rainy day fund as well as a contingency fund. But no, it's a very valid point on having a secondary business, or maybe a main business, and then coming in. If some people might have a carpentry business or a plumbing business and are starting out in development, I didn't, and it was a big constraint from two occasions or two issues. One, cash flow. When things stopped, it stopped, like COVID. And two, for building a team. Like now I've runway, but until last year I hadn't run enough runway. So if I was all my cash is in on certain deals, and it slows down for COVID or whatever, or that deal is now coming to a completion, which is great, or project's coming to a completion, it takes about minimum probably 6 months to get a deal over the line. So if you didn't have the next site starting, your team that you've built up now, in my case, you had to let them go because you couldn't just keep paying their wages. So if I had an ancillary business that was cash flowing it, you could take it slightly different. Now, thankfully, I've built up a quite considerable commercial business. I've a few investors with me, but we've about 100,000 square feet at the end of this year that we'll own and fully leased. So there's good rent coming in off that. But yeah, like I think it's great. Stu, you at Skylofts. But as we said about cash flow, if you have 100 grand after a couple of projects, or a couple of 100 grand, Dorian was here. You're always generally looking at another deal with that money, even before it comes in. When you're expecting to make gross amount of money on the end of a project, for 6 months prior to that finishing, you're going out hunting, looking for the next deal, because it takes that long. Where now I have about 3 or 4 years of runway ahead of me in terms of delivery of a project in front of me. So that's very important, but it's difficult to do that at the start unless you have a secondary business or a main business.
Well, that's actually one of the Dorian. Sorry, Jack. I just remember Dorian said recently, and I think it was in the podcast, where he met with, I'm not going to say names, but he met with a guy, very wealthy guy, and he consulted the guy on cash flow and said, I've got these cash flow issues. What's the best way to solve them? Do I need to raise more money? Do I need to do this, do that? And the guy just said, look, mate, you need a bigger pipeline. That's how you solve it. Because if you've got the pipeline, you've got continuity of works, and so long as you have them funded, then you can build out that core part of the business. It's particularly for Dorian's kind of business, and now for your kind of business, Ronan, where I'm guessing you're going to start to build that operational team to deliver these projects sequentially. So you're moving them from this project to that one, to that one, to that one, to that one. And that's the game, isn't it? When you're starting out in developments, how do you get to that point? And there's this this sort of like shit valley in between where you got to try and get through. And I think that's where Jack always mentions critical mass, isn't it? Where you need to get to that part where once you're over the other side, your overheads are now actually making you profit rather than being something that you need to fork out for yourself or need to accept no profit on your first few deals because you've got to forward fund those overheads. And it's always a trap, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just sort of taking a step back and contexting your cash flow problem is really important. We're talking about two
He's gone
different
again.
cash flow issues here. We're talking about business cash flow and we're talking about personal expenditure cash flow. So obviously when you set up a business and you've got a trading entity like Stuart might have Skylofts and it pays for his lifestyle, he can then go set up a development company which is self-sufficient, asset
Pays for the
building,
mistakes,
legacy
Jack.
company, and keeps growing. But one thing that Ryan's just said there, which is really important, is when Ben and I were running our development company, we were actually quite a profitable, high cash flow business when it was just two of us. Then when you go to the next stage where you go from like a 10 mil turnover to like a 30, 50 mil turnover business, you need a team. And that team around you comes at a cost. And that cost is running whether the project's finished or incomplete over the sort of 1, 2, 3 year process. So you could sort of reinvest all the capital to get to a size that suits that team so that you're then making a cash flow again. And then there's the next step where you take your business from 50 to 200, maybe even greater, or even bring construction in house. And then you've got a new problem of cash flow. But so taking a step back and analyzing about the reinvestment, because there was a period where, you know, Ben and I had all of the businesses we were running. So there's 6 businesses in the group, and we're like, why are we always cash strapped? You know, are we running around like headless chickens and overdoing what we're doing? And then when you actually looked at every business was growing 100% year on year for the first 5 years, you should expect that as a result. So growth is something that's often neglected. So the reason that I bring that in is because if I met a early 20-year-olds running a couple of businesses and he was having cash flow problems, that doesn't mean there's profit problems. So I always look at businesses in 3 metrics. So you've got cash flow, profit, and risk. And it's all about you have high risk, low risk businesses. Normally, higher risk businesses produce higher profits. But in every business, you've got to have cash flow to get to the profits. Businesses don't fail off profit. Very few businesses fail off profit. Businesses fail because they haven't got the cash flow to get to the profit, or they haven't got the risk profile to de-risk to get to the profit. So the way that we see it is cash flow and risk is 2 stepping stones that you have to cross to get to the profit at the end. If you don't manage all 3 of those metrics, then you're doing something wrong. Little secret for anyone: if profit isn't there, you're going to have cash flow and risk problems regardless, and it's pointless taking that journey forward. So yeah, break the business down in terms of size, mass, group, what it looks like at the end, and then look at those 3 important things to make sure that you can sort of facilitate getting to the profit at the end.
Jack, just to touch on your 2 things there, I commend anyone who's trying to scale a business, because when you scale a business and put those different tiers of management in, it's a fucking pain in the ass, because you've got really good technicians. You have to either put people above or below them. You have to raise people up to become managers, which may not be their major skill set, or you bring managers in who will potentially destroy the culture you've been building. So by trying that, I commend anyone who wants to run a large business and cash flow, or anyone who wants to run a development company who hasn't got a cash flowing business on the side. Fair play, because you're going to have to make very little mistakes and you're going to have to grow a lot slower, I would say. I think the beautiful thing about having a sideline trading business is that it will plug gaps. And if we made a 20 grand or a 30 grand problem, that is only a 2, 3, 4 month problem that we can cash flow ourselves out of. So yeah, fair play to anyone who wants to scale or run a development company on its own.
Just the last point on that. Sorry, Ryan.
Go on.
Go on ahead. I just going to say, like, people might be saying, like, how could the cash flow get so tight so quick? Like, look at the people you're employing and the wages. Like, you're not paying people, you know, your minimum wage. Your guys are charging from 6, not your QSs, your project managers. You have maybe 60, 100 grand, 140 grand. You know, so you add 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys together, like your run rate per month gets high. I'd say Jack's business is probably 300,000-400,000. I'm north of that as well. Like, all of a sudden, the figures are high. So cash can move very, very quick. So that's where it really gets tight.
I mean, that's exactly why we started to scale our business, because we did an end of terrace development made 50 grand out of it, and realized that that's basically 6 weeks of our burn rate. What's the point? So you have to understand that sort of scale and growth. And one thing I wanted to touch on that Ryan brought up, which I think that gets neglected a lot in our industry, and when, if you probably tracked back all of our clocks 5 years in the development space, we'd have been a bit wet behind the ears to this, is if you're running, Ryan mentioned, if you're running a project, if you see a project and you like the look of it and you want to move into development, and let's say it's £1 million gross development value, which for us guys is, for any development, you'll do well to do anything smaller than that if it's multiple units. Now, what you have to think is you're technically running £1 million turnover business overnight. You set up a limited company, you acquire that, and you're basically buying a large business that's large by any account, and you've got to have everything in place, and you've got to think about the sales, the marketing, operations, the finance, and the team, which is often neglected. People go, well, I'll just get a QS and a PM and tackle the planning and then build it out. It's simple, but you don't think about all of the ailments that would come with a business. So it's what we did is we got excited. Ben and I were from a construction or professional background, so we were confident in the construction, but we didn't think about all those elements. And then when we started bringing the second scheme in, we started thinking more about the core business, what that looks like, who the team is, what they cost, like Ronan said, and then facilitating a business plan. So the project is just a project; it's not actually the business itself, and that's also super key. But yeah, super relative, because Ronan's obviously not afraid of scale, but that comes with, I say the phrase all the time. Businesses are more likely to fail from indigestion than starvation, and it's managing that process.
Yeah. Well, let's get we'll now go on to Ronan's projects. So we'll start to have a look at stuff. Just before though, just for something you mentioned, Stu, and I don't know if anyone here has any conviction in their assumptions, but I know a lot of guys who start developments sometimes do start with a lot of money. They've gotten a big payout from a high paying job, or they exited a company, sold Jack knows somebody sold a clothing company. There's people can end up having 5, 10, 20, 50 mil sat in the bank, and then they might start a development business. And that happens a lot. And all of our investors start like that, but they're obviously coming to us to be the development service, but they are kind of developers themselves. So most of the time you do have developers starting because they've ran into a large sum of cash. And that's
maybe they were selling peanuts beforehand.
A lot of fucking peanuts, and they built a casino.
You see the guy for Phones for You? Like, he's turned into one of the major developers in London now.
Is he?
There was a program built about him. I'm trying to think of the story.
Yeah, and I think that chap that has Netflix special on the London real estate guy.
Yeah,
he's selling one of his homes for 250 million or 300 million, whatever the price is at the moment. But yeah, he sort of started out selling phones. Obviously, he's a billionaire from it, but they all seem to get their hand into property development at some stage too.
I think it makes sense, because the point being, sorry, just because development is capital intensive, isn't it? So you need a lot of cash. So it makes sense that people exit a company, run into a lot of cash, want to change a lifestyle, think it's sexy to become a developer, or just know that there is a good investment case there. Then they become this developer. Some of them then go bust, or some of them get burnt and then sort of go back into their field. And some of them do really well out of it. But not all developers bootstrap the way I think all of us guys have, where you start from nothing and you have to build your own war chest or a complementary service or vehicle to navigate through the early stages. But there are equally a lot of developers who start with a lot of money.
You still got to ask the right questions, though. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. If you're making ultimately, the buck stops with you. So you can have all the money to bring the right people in, but you need to know what people you need to make the whole piece of the puzzle work. So I can imagine a lot of people with a lot of money will lose a lot of money, and almost like it's like grassroots, small beginnings, and you have to make these little decisions on the way. If someone gave me £1 billion today and went, right, go and build Barbados, go and build bloody Ronan, you'd lose it all, because you just wouldn't have all the skills and all the things you need to make it happen. So it's not all about the money.
To put it into context of talking about business or something from business and then allocating into real estate, which is super common and across, we've just been talking about Ronan's old firm that were in peanuts. If you haven't read the book, read Alan Sugar's autobiography. It's one of the first books I read. I was super young when I read it and absolutely loved his story from growing from the ground up. He actually would take up the road planings that were little bits of timber, put them in a bag, and then sell them around his local estate as kindling wood for fires. And he would get, like small bits of change for each of them, but he was recycling a product that was not wanted, putting it in a marketplace that was wanted, and making a small fortune of it. But anyway, everyone knows Alan Sugar now because of the Apprentice. But to put things in perspective, he set up Amstrad, which was basically a computer manufacturing and stereo business, is how it started up. So he was in tech/IT. He ended up selling that business in 2007 for £125 million. He is now worth, from real estate investments, 1.66 billion from investments of his capital into real estate and growth. So predominantly his value is real estate and investing in the businesses, and obviously making it into the top 100 Sunday Times rich list. So he's like a bit of a beast, but he was always segueing some of his capital into the offices that he operated. Then he would buy another office and he would let that out, and so on and so forth. So
I think we pipped into the post on the Windsor one, by the way. Amstrad. Alan Sugar, yeah. I think his nephew was up for it, and
I think it's his. Is it son or son-in-law that's pretty active?
Yeah, he's the real estate purchaser. Got in there fast, mate. 9 days from offer to completion, so I had to move fast on it. But yeah, super proud of that site.
Nicely done, mate. Nicely done.